Welcome back to Economics A Level, Unit 3, Perfect Competition. Now, when we talk about a perfect competition, we're talking about a market that has high level of competition. So here I wrote, the model of a perfect competition explains the market where there is a high degree of competition. It is called the market competition not because it maximizes economic welfare, rather it has the characteristics that can make it operate perfectly. So there's no market that is perfect. The only closest market that is perfect is in the agricultural sector. But we call it a market, a perfect competition, because it has similar characteristics that can make it operate perfectly. So similarly, we might not find a perfect market. We might not find a perfect market in reality, but we can find markets that have several characteristics that are similar to a perfect market. So what are the characteristics of a perfect market? The first one, a large number of both buyers and sellers exist, ensuring no single entity can determine or can dominate the market. So the first characteristic of a perfectly competitive market is that there are large numbers of buyers and sellers, which means none of those buyers or sellers can dominate or influence the price. So this implies that none has the ability to influence the price. So both buyers and sellers are called price takers. So they are price takers because none of them is big enough to influence the price. Another characteristic in a perfect market or in a perfect competition is that there's freedom of entry and exit from the industry. So firms can enter or leave the market without significant barriers like high startup cost or legal restriction. In a perfectly competitive market, firms, there's free entry to and exit from. Why? Why is it possible? It is possible because in a perfect competitive market, there's no legal restriction. Like maybe there is no legal restrictions like government restrictions or legal monopoly, or there's no startup cost because all firms in that market they are small firms. So which means anybody can set up in such industry. Do you get the point here? Because you can set up with because you can set up with a lower cost, it means as soon as you feel that or you figure out that you don't want to stay in the market anymore or it's not favorable anymore, you can leave. That's why there's free entry to an exit from the market. Is it clear?
Yeah.
That's another characteristic of a perfectly competitive market. The third one, all firms produce homogeneous products. So the products sold by different firms are identical. In essence, consumers are indifferent to which firm they purchase from. So they sell to the same customers because they produce homogeneous products. The last one, it is also assumed that the second to the last one, it is also assumed that firms are profit maximizers. This is because they aim to produce the quantity of output where their marginal cost equals to their market price. So firms in a perfectly competitive market are profit maximizer in the short run. Why? Because they only want to produce the quantity that would allow them that would allow their marginal cost to equal to the market price. So in a perfectly competitive market, demand is equals to average revenue, which is the same as the marginal revenue. And why? Because price is always constant in a perfectly competitive market. Why is price constant? Price is constant because none of the firm is able to influence the price of the product. Do you get it? Any question about that?
No.
So what are the implications of a perfectly competitive market? The first one we need to talk about is efficiency. So for efficiency, what do I mean by efficiency here? Perfect competition is often cited as an ideal model of achieving efficiency in resource allocation because firms are compelled to produce at the lowest possible cost. There's efficiency in a perfectly competitive market. Why? Because you have to sell at the market price. Selling at the market price means no firm would be able to sell if it continues to incur more cost. So if you are incurring more cost, it is at your own, it's your cup of tea. Because if you are selling at a higher price, your consumers will leave you to buy from other competitors who are selling at the market price. So it is important for every firm in a perfectly competitive market to be efficient because it is only in efficiency that they can have a reduced cost of production, which will allow them to sell at the market price because the market price is constant. That is efficiency. So firms in a perfectly competitive market are always efficient. And why? Because price is constant. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Then price determination, which is another implication. The market price is determined by the intersection of the overall market supply and demand. And individual firms simply adjust their product quantity to meet this price. In a perfectly competitive market, price is constant, which simply means that the price determination is based on demand, the intersection between demand and supply. So every firm in that industry must adjust their quantity to the market price. Do you understand price determination there?
Yeah.
There's the long run equilibrium. Firms in a perfect competition tend to make normal profit in the long run, which covers all costs, including opportunity costs. In the short run, they are profit maximizer. They make profit, they maximize profit in the short run. But what happens in the short run? Because if you are making more profit in the short run, based on the fact that it's a perfectly competitive market, it attracts more firms into that market. And the more firms come into the market, the lesser the price becomes. So that is why in the long run, they always they make normal profit. And the normal profit will only cover for what? The cost of their production and the opportunity cost. Do you understand? In the short run, they are profit maximizer. But in the long run, they make normal profit. Why do they make normal profit in the long run? They make normal profit in the long run because in the short run, they've attracted more firms into their market based on the fact that they make the highest possible profit. And that attracts potential firms. Do you get the point there?
Yeah.
And the last implication is that there are few real world examples, like I said earlier. The only real example about a perfectly competitive market is in the agricultural sector. All the other sectors are imperfect. Though they might have some similarities regarding the characteristics of a perfectly competitive market, but they are not perfect. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So yeah, in theory, there is perfect competition, but in reality, perfect competition is rare. The only close example is in the agricultural sector. Is it clear?
Yeah.
Any question about perfect competition?
No.
No. So that takes us to demand and revenue. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Demand and revenue. In a perfectly competitive market, the demand curve for an individual firm is perfectly elastic and horizontal. This means the firm can sell any quantity at the market price without affecting it because average revenue, the marginal revenue, and the price are all equal for the firm. Listen, demand simply means the quantity of goods and services consumers are willing to buy at a given price and time, right? That is demand. So revenue is the amount of money made in the course of selling to consumers. Yes or no?
Yeah.
So in a perfectly competitive market, demand equals to revenue. Why? Because firms can only produce the quantity at the market price. So any quantity you want to sell, you can sell as much as possible quantities, but it has to be what? At the market price. So whatever quantity you sell, it has to be at the constant market price. So when market demand increases, the market price rises and individual firms increase their output, potentially leading to economic profits in the short run. As soon as demand increases in the market, firms tend to tends to produce more. And in the course of producing more, they will make a short-run profit, which is economic profit. But the problem about economic profit is that it attracts potential sellers, potential firms into that market. And that's why in the long run, they will make normal profit. They won't be able to make abnormal profit. So conversely, a decrease in market demand leads to a lower market price, reduced output from individual firms, and potential losses. So the problem about a perfect competitive market here is that if demand reduces, output would fall, and in turn, it will lead to losses. If demand increases, output will increase, profit will increase. If demand falls in a perfectly competitive market, output will fall, losses will come in. Is it clear? So the explanation is this. Excuse me. In a perfect competition, the demand is always perfectly elastic. Why is it perfectly elastic? It is perfectly elastic because In the perfect competition, many firms sell identical products. And when you sell identical products, it simply means you as a firm, you are just a small part of the market. So whatever you do, you can only sell, no matter how much quantity you produce, you can only sell at the market price. So this means that if a firm tries to raise its price even slightly, it will lose all its customers to other firms selling at the market price. Therefore, the demand curve for the individual firm is perfectly horizontal. So in a perfect competitive market, the demand curve is what? Horizontal. Why is it horizontal? It is horizontal because a firm in a perfectly competitive market is only a part of the market. So you cannot raise your price. If you raise your price, your consumers will go to other competitors. Is it clear? So the revenue in a perfectly competition, for our average revenue is total revenue divided by quantity. That's TR divided by Q. So in a perfect competition, since total revenue is price and multiplied by quantity, and the price is constant, it means our average revenue equals to price. So whatever we get here will still be price and will still be average revenue. So in a perfect competitive market, average revenue equals to demand, which is equals to the marginal revenue. That takes us to marginal revenue itself. Because in a perfect competitive market, we're going to talk about the price, we're going to talk about the marginal revenue, I'm going to talk about the average revenue. So for average revenue, which is the total revenue divided by the price. For marginal revenue, this is the additional revenue from selling one more unit. So in a perfect competition, because price is constant, selling one more unit to the market price will only add to the total revenue. So in a perfect competitive market, marginal revenue equals to price. In a perfect competitive market, average revenue equals to price. Marginal revenue equals to price. And price is determined by the demand for and the supply of.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yes.
So the price is in a perfectly competitive market is determined by the intersection of market supply and market demand. I think it's clear.
Yeah.
Great. Now, the figure 2 and figure 3 explanation. For figure 2, it said, based on the graph, so the graph shows that the market price is at E, and the demand for and supply, the output produced is at G. So if any firm wants to increase its supply, based on the fact that I told you that a firm is just a small part of that market. So a firm here, this is a firm, a small part of this market. So whatever you supply, you can only increase your own output, but does not have any significant effect on the price because you are just a small part of that market. So a firm has increased its output here from S1 to S2, but it has not really changed anything from S. So you cannot shift the supply curve rightward as a result of that. Because whatever output you increase is only slightly part of what the market is. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So no firm is big enough to influence output, is big enough to influence price. Do you get it?
Yes.
So the market price will still remain at OE, while the quantity will still be at OG. And demand will equal to supply. That is where our marginal revenue equals to our average revenue. So in a perfect competitive market, no firm can influence the output. So if you are increasing your output, you can only increase it to sell at the same price. So whatever you sell, it's still going to be at the market price. Is it clear?
Yeah.
So that is figure 2. Then figure 3 is what I already explained with demand, which is horizontal. So I said, this is the explanation on revenue curves, where demand equals to average revenue equals to marginal revenue. So the curve is horizontal because price is what? Constant. Is it clear? Any question about that?
No.
So that takes us to cost and supply curve.